Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of stories affecting the Sikh community around the world. And in India, two alleged Pakistan-based groups are formally charged with the Pahalgam terror attacks. But even the BBC raises red flags about the potential of it all being a false flag attack by Indian intelligence. More on that later. And talking of India's misbehaviour, a US Congresswoman has come out publicly also now condemning India's dangerous transnational repression on US sovereign soil. Well, all that and more on today's show, but joining me as always is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there all around the world. I was just saying to Angus before we came to air that we are counting down the final couple of shows here before the end of the year. We are looking forward to a bit of a break, and when we come back from that holiday break, you might notice something a little different as I've got several TV roles coming up, and I've got to actually grow out a bit of facial fur, so it's something a little different when we come back from the holidays. But hey, you can leave your comments on that when the time comes. But in the meantime, we will be checking the comment section of the site as we work our way through the holidays, and we may respond directly to some of them since we won't have the show on the air. We'll be on a bit of a break. So with that said, of course, stick around to the end of the show tonight to see what comments we're going to discuss on the air. And don't forget to leave your comments. We love reading them and responding, and of course, featuring some of them on the show because you are a valued part of the show just as much as Angus and I are, because together we make this information system work and get the truth out to the masses. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed we do, absolutely. And in the meantime, James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And we'll take a look at lazy great comments at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Today we are looking at some crime statistics that I was actually a little surprised about. It turns out, well, in a way, I guess I wasn't surprised. I was looking at the crime severity index for different countries, and the 2025 numbers, although preliminary because we still have a couple of weeks left in the year, but the preliminary numbers for worldwide have been released. And of course, we know that Venezuela is a swamp-infested, drug cartel-filled country, but there are some beautiful places and beautiful people there as well. So it's sad to see that they made number one, because I would love to see the nation find peace and stability instead of the political turmoil that they're facing. And as a result, the increase in gangs, cartels, and violence overall. And let's also keep in mind that this is not necessarily fully engulfed in the violent crime severity index, but crime severity in general. So it would include the property crimes and those things as well of a non-violent nature. Now, in the list, of course, Papua New Guinea, Afghanistan, South Africa, Honduras, these are ones that we've talked about recently in other stories about the crime severity index. But what I found interesting is if we actually scroll down a bit, India ranks at 77, and I would have expected that they would have been higher than the US or the UK, who ranked in at 65 for the UK and 55 for the USA. Now, let's also take into context the reason why, on the other hand, I was not surprised, is because of the statistical generation of numbers. And in India, not all crimes are put into a main database. There are a lot of regions that are still paper, or where, for example, we've talked about sexual assaults and other instances like that, where the police actually encourage victims not to file any type of reports, let alone to file the first information report, which is essentially filing a police report or pressing of charges. So this was interesting in the fact that, again, they ranked further down the list than a lot of the Western nations, and I find that it probably is due to the lack of transparency when it comes to the criminal justice system in India. Let's, though, take a look at the other side of it, is that India has some of the highest numbers when it comes to people who are arbitrarily detained and people who are sitting in jail for years and, in some cases, decades without actually actual charges going through the court process and making their way through a trial. And we know, for example, Jaggi, among others, who are in that predicament where there is such a breakdown in the justice system and the enforcement of timelines to make sure that people are treated fairly, equally, and in a just system that claims to be one that comes from the most populous democratic country in the world. Democracy has its responsibilities, and throughout this year, we have been noticing a lot of that just breaking down. Not only in terms of the incarcerated, not just in terms of the treatment of prisoners, but also in terms of human rights of people throughout the nation of India. Now, with this said, my prediction, Angus, over the first 5 years of Khalistan being sovereign, I'm going to predict that they are in the top 25 for safety. I'm going to think that it's going to take a few years for an adjustment and for people to get used to a new system, a new political sphere, as well as I'm assuming it's going to be a lot different in terms of how the criminal justice system and the policing system will be laid out in Khalistan when that happens. But mark my words, I say within the first 5 years, they will rank up there in the top. And when I'm saying the top, I don't mean like this list. I'm talking about the safest nations and the most welcoming nations. And I think that's where Khalistan is going to excel. I think that they are also going to be amazing when it comes to international policing as well, because we know that, the RCMP, the FBI, MI5, I believe it is there in the UK, Angus, that they travel around the world and help to train police officers in all kinds of things from security and intelligence through to just community policing programs. So I think that that's where they are going to open the doors to learn as much as they can. But let's also keep in mind how many of the Sikh community are actually out there in law enforcement around the world. And they will transfer those skills, that knowledge. And I believe a lot of them will actually join the Khalistan police force. They will return to Khalistan as their homeland and a sovereign state and bring with it that sense of justice and that sense of community when it comes to policing and really empowering people to make change on their own, not just through the criminal justice system or the court system. And so I wanted to bring that up just because I thought that that was an interesting statistics. Here we go. Canada's at 45.7, which actually brings us in quite high as well in terms of our crime severity index. And ironically, when you look at the UK, when you look at Canada, you look at the US, a lot of that transnational crime that's being led by the Bishnoi gang, of course, is a contributing factor to this number. So again, it seems like India is a safer nation because they keep sending their criminals to the Western nations and have them perform their transnational repression and criminality, gang activity, to whether it's extortion or otherwise. So again, it's just a very interesting statistic that I thought I would share with everybody tonight. Now, on a more positive note, as we're working our way to the holidays, I thought I would take you on a backstage tour, so to speak, at the Surrey Food Bank to see how it actually comes together to help the community. Now, where you're at, depending on the town or the city in different parts of the world, of course, you may have community kitchens, you may have different iterations of food banks, but I thought that I would take you inside of one of the largest here in Metro Vancouver and just kind of give you a quick behind the scenes tour of what happens there. So let's take a look at that as we work our way towards the holidays here.
Good day, everyone. It's James here, and I'm at the food bank here in Surrey, British Columbia, where I like to give some time throughout the holiday season. And you can see my hair's all over because we've been out picking up donations from the different donation points throughout the city. And I thought I would take a few minutes here to take you for a tour on the workings of the Surrey Food Bank here in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. Don't forget that if you have the ability to help out the local food banks or others in need this holiday season, you can go to www.propicscanada.com. That's PROPICS Canada.com, and just follow the link on the home page there. And let's take you for a walk through, and I will show you how the magic happens here at the Surrey Food Bank. And here we have the truck that I've just brought in. They are unloading it now. We've been out for most of the day to different points throughout the city of Surrey, picking up donations from the community, and they are now unloading them into the warehouse. And of course, next to us in the loading bay here is the Surrey Food Bank truck, and this is a refrigerated unit because they do have, as you'll see in the tour, ability to take perishable items as well if they're dropped off at the warehouse, not at community drop locations, because they have to remain refrigerated. So again, if you have the ability to donate to the food bank or to other organizations and programs throughout the holiday season, I encourage you to do so, but don't forget that even throughout the holiday season or throughout the rest of the year, you can always give of your time, which is also very valuable to the different organizations that are in need of volunteers. Here you can see the Christmas van all decorated up once again, as it is every year, but we don't have the lights on. But look, Santa's got his hat and a spare one in there. He's helping out this year as well. So here we are now inside the warehouse. I'm going to do this little tour without catching any of the volunteers or anybody on camera. And you can see that the warehouse is quite substantial here, and the amount of food that is distributed throughout the community is just vast amounts every year. And of course you can see here just different areas, different baby items, diapers, wipes, all of the things that are needed for families throughout this holiday season and of course throughout the year. Sorted into different areas, and just amazing amount of volunteers and staff that make this all come together. So as you can see, they've been unloading the truck, and this is the stuff that we've just brought in here to the food bank here in Surrey. They unload it here into the warehouse, and then it gets moved over to another area for it to be sorted to make sure that nothing is past its expiration dates, and to sort it into the different categories and taking into account any special dietary or religious accommodations when it comes to the food. And again, as we walk through here, you can see the amounts of food, but it looks like a lot at first, but when you realize the volume of people that are assisted here and the increased need over this past year, of course it is barely enough to keep up. And here we have the giant freezer. As you can see, it's a massive freezer. This was something that they didn't have at the old food bank location before we moved them into the new one a few years back. So again, really trying to be able to handle all of the volume of need in the community, as well as, of course, the different types of food that they're able to process and distribute is amazing as well, with the larger and more inclusive facility. So here we have this, the sorting stations where they can sort things and put together hampers or whatever they need to do. And again, this is quite the setup where they deal with over 1 million pounds of food throughout the holiday season and distribute out to those in need. So this would be the main reception entrance for the clients who are in need to come in and register or to come and pick up food on the days. So again, you can find the information at surreyfoodbank.org. And that's where you can find out if you need to register, if you need that little bit of help. By all means, that is what the food bank is here for, and they are here to just to help you out. It's non-judgmental. There's a lot of respect for all of your needs and for the confidentiality. So again, amazing work by the Surrey Food Bank to help the community, not just at Christmas time, but all throughout the year. And as we know, the economy is pretty tough right now, and more families, including working families with 2 working parents or adults in the house, and there's still a need there. So it shows where the economy is at right now and the struggles that people are having. So we thank all of the staff and volunteers at the Surrey Food Bank. Up on the second floor are all of the administration offices, the logistics, and just all of the people that make this all work and make the wheels roll on the streets to gather donations and to bring them back to make sure that families are fed. So once again, this is James Cousineau. Thank you for taking the time for this little quick video behind the scenes at the Surrey Food Bank. Take care, everyone, and stay safe. Good day, everyone. It's James here, and I'm at the food.
Well, there we go, Angus. As you can see, we did some stories about the food bank and about food insecurity. And this one location here, that's the largest in Metro Vancouver, but on average, the Canadian food banks are up 16% in terms of need and use for client counts. And yet the donations are down over 35% this year across Canada. So it shows that the numbers are huge for the clients that are coming in and needing food, and that little bit of help minus, of course, the amount of donations coming in, but also for volunteers as well. So no matter where you live, if there's a food pantry, a food bank or whatever, and you don't have the ability to make a financial contribution or donate some non-perishable food items, they're always looking for volunteers. So a great way to get involved in your community and to help others at this tough time of year, especially.
Indeed, yes. I mean, fantastic to see that, James. Really, really sterling work. Well done. It's great to see because, of course, this time of year, in the depths of winter, the vulnerable really are suffering, and certainly the homeless and those who are struggling in life really rely on these food banks. We're certainly here in the UK, we see the food banks are in increasing demand, which is really a terrible indictment, really, of our modern society. In our relatively wealthy societies, there shouldn't be people sleeping on our streets or reliant on food banks. We're supposed to be wealthy countries, but of course, we're not perfect, and certainly there are deep flaws in our own society that we still need in the 21st century, things like food banks. But anyway, I did actually notice, just on a side note, here in the UK, was it a couple of nights ago on the BBC? I just flicked on the BBC News in the evening, and there was a wonderful article, a similar article actually, in Luton, which is a town just outside London on the north side, and it was about the local Sikh community who had, as they do on a regular basis, they were out there giving out warm food to the homeless. It was langar. It was essentially it was a Sikh food bank, giving out, as they did. I think they did it whether it was nightly or weekly, I can't actually remember. But anyway, it interviewed some members of the local Sikh community who were just there doing their saver, their selfless service, as they do on a regular basis, just as part of what they do. And it was a really heartwarming story, and it was lovely to see the BBC covering it in a really in-depth manner. And of course, they did highlight the fact that it was the Sikh community who were behind this as well. So, and again, likewise, just full of volunteers from the community doing their saver. So lovely to see that. James, I just want to move back to your first statistics story, because I sat there thinking, really, I mean, about the crimes. And there is this sort of phrase in English: we have lies, damn lies, and we have statistics. And I have to say, looking through that list, how on earth has India ended up many places below the United Kingdom, the United States, etc.? And I just thought, it stinks. This cannot be right. But everything that we know about India, you don't even need statistical analysis just to know instinctively that something is wrong with that. Anyway, I did it whilst you were talking. I did likewise. I just did the research myself. And this the organisation that reported this, that graphic that it showing India at, what is it, 77 or something, and then the US and UK worse than them by a huge margin. And that same graphic is used right across all the Godi media. So suddenly, if you Google that, they're all reporting it. The Godi media reporting it, as of course they would. They're very proud of that statistic, but it does absolutely smack of suspicion. Where on earth did those numbers come from? As we all know, you can create statistics to basically prove any so-called fact that you want. You can just cherry pick the statistics. And I can't find, I must confess, I looked for the actual source of these statistics, and I struggled to find it. I tried to dig down, okay, who actually generated these statistics? And James, you're showing it up again. So yeah, I had a look at this. Anyway,
There we go. This one here is the World Population Review. Is this one here?
Yeah, so the World Population Review, and then so I said, okay, well let's find something to corroborate this, and of course I think just to just sort of show the point, I'll just show you the one I dug up. This is worlddata.info. Now this comes up with a completely different conclusion. I'm not saying this one is right, but again, it's just highlighting this fact, James, that we talk often about, is that it's so easy to prove your point just cherry picking statistics. And this one, for example, I have to say I found this one a little bit more reliable in terms, instinctively reliable. It talks about Finland actually come top, but Mexico on this one is the bottom. There's a few obvious suspects like South Africa. I think there's another one that said South Africa was the most dangerous country in the world, most crime-ridden, etc. So again, there's always going to be variations. There's Venezuela here sitting, what's that, about 10th, 12th down there. But interestingly, on this one, India actually comes up a lot closer to the top here, just to give you a sense of scale. There's India there. And there's a second statistic here, which actually is I think, equally important. This first one is a sort of like I don't know, it's a ranking. Again, I don't know how they've actually got to this figure. Yeah. But this second figure is actually more telling. This figure is what they call the resilience index. And this actually is across a lot of them. The resilience, as this one defines it, resilience is the the best ability to fight crime. Now it says in general this characteristic is attributed above all to countries with a functioning democracy. That's interesting. Autocratically governed countries are less likely to be able to curb crime. Now, paradoxically to what this own website says. Now, you look at this, India, the resilience factor compared to the countries around it is significantly higher. So that's saying India is actually, despite the fact it's crime-ridden, it is actually very resilient and it can tackle its crime very effectively. Okay, you think that's great, functioning democracy. But then I just noticed, look here, China. Just 4 or 5 places better than India. So China actually has slightly less crime, but likewise sticks out, again, very noticeably as having a high resilience factor. Now, what do China and India have in common? Authoritarian regimes. And there are others here. UAE, which actually is, technically, it is an authoritarian technocracy. It is a strongly Islamic Islamic governance model. Again, equivalently high resilience. In other words, it's these regimes that have the ability, essentially, to be authoritative. They have the complete control over their people. And again, this is what we highlight, James, on a regular basis, how authoritarian India is. So I think that in itself is very telling. And just to highlight the suspicions of the whole thing, way down here, there's the UK. The lower down you are, the better. The UK is down here. We've got most of the European countries. I think the US is somewhere around that sort of area. And then, of course, we come down to the bottom end, Finland. I don't know where Canada is. Oh, there's Canada, James. You yourselves live in a very safe environment, despite the fact of some of the shootings that we record regularly. But there you go, James. I think, as I said, I think these statistics we regularly point out again, as you have done, that these statistics, you can take a certain story out of them, but you've got to be very, very careful with them. Right. And as I say, what these statistics really don't tell, and again, we talked about this again recently, James, was the nature of these crimes. And if I was a woman walking alone down a street, which of these countries would I feel more safe in? And that's a real test, I think. And I would suspect that India does not feature very highly in that one. Ironically, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, as a woman on my own, I would be very happy to walk down the street at 2 o'clock in the morning because I know I would, in all likelihood, be totally safe. Would I feel like that walking down the street in Delhi or Ahmedabad or wherever? I think we know the answer to that one, James.
Absolutely. Now, I believe that this is the organized crime index here that you've got up, Angus.
Oh, no, that's
and so.
Actually, I don't think it is.
I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, I did find that one as well, and it was so complicated, enough time to sort of talk about it. But yeah, I think, Jez, I think the conclusion is it's take your pick.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was my point. Is that you can look at the numbers, and I just don't believe that India is where it is on that list that we were talking about, that you pulled up, that it's also spread on the Hindutva networks and that, because again, there's just so much transparency when it comes to a lot of the regular, or what I call the truly democratic countries and Western nations, whereas countries like India like to manipulate numbers, whether it's their GDP, whether it's their crime severity index, whether it's even something that we know, and that is the high prevalence of human rights abuses or sexual assaults. We know are skyrocketing numbers when you compare them to other nations, and yet they try to shake their head and, like an ostrich, bury their head in the sand just to pretend that that issue is not there. And just to finalize, the last chart, or the second chart that I was showing there, Angus, is a compilation of information from the United Nations, the U.S. Census, as well as the American Community Survey and the Pew Research Center. So it's all of those statistics combined in the second chart that I showed, not the first one, just for clarification, because I wanted to show that first chart to show that I think India is full of shit, to put it bluntly.
And actually, I think you raised a great point there, actually, of course, about the GDP figures. When we view these statistics allegedly coming out of India, we do have to treat them with an element of suspicion, because, of course, their track record is very questionable when it comes to statistics. We reported recently that there is a professor actually in India itself who was saying, look, I believe as an academic, we are misreporting the GDP of India by up to, I think it was over 50%. He reckoned the GDP was more than 50% less in reality than India is reporting. So its track record in terms of statistical reporting is very questionable. And when we talk about crime, James, as you rightly said, not all crimes are reported. In fact, there is probably a very large percentage of crimes in India are not reported because they are perpetuated against their lower caste individuals, who, of course, feel that they don't belong in any sort of legal in any legal sense. So. Anyway, James, interesting stuff. Thanks for that story. That's quite a fascinating topic we could talk for hours about, clearly. So let me move on now. And I'm going to talk about. I'll start from my side. I'm going to talk about in the US. This was a lady, a congresswoman in the US, a lady called Pramila Jayapal. Now, she is a congresswoman, and she represents Seattle. And just to give you a bit of background, just so you can put her in context of what she's just, I'll show you a very short video of what she said in Congress recently. She was actually Indian born. She was born in Tamil Nadu in Chennai, and her parents were Dravidian. And she moved to the US when she was about 16 years old. And it's relevant that she was born to Dravidian parents in Tamil Nadu, because, of course, Tamil Nadu itself has a bit of obviously a history of secessionism. And we have the Dravidians rising up in the early 20th century, etc. So she comes from that sort of context. And she's obviously fully aware of the political dynamics of India, the caste system, etc., and, of course, the RSS. Now, when she moved to the US, she's, again, a very active campaigner. She's left-wing. She sits with the Democratic Party. As I say, she represents Seattle for the Democrats. She's a very high achiever. She's the first Indian-American woman to serve in the US House of Representatives. She's the first Asian-American to represent Washington at the federal level. Now, she's got a long track record of fighting for the rights of immigrants. This has put, I think, her in the spotlight of the right wing of India. Of the US, the right wing of quite often having a pop at her, because, of course, she does represent quite very actively the immigrant or the more recent immigrants into the US. And, for example, she founded the Hate Free Zone, and this was an organisation after the September 11th attacks, which was an advocacy group for immigrant groups. And it registered, it allowed new American citizens, immigrants, to vote, and lobbied on immigration reform and related issues and stuff like that. And, for example, it successfully sued the Bush administration's Immigration and Naturalization Services to prevent the deportation of over 4,000 Somalis across the country. So, again, there was this whole sort of long track record of her acting on behalf of immigrants. And what else has she done? Recently, December 2019, she introduced a bill to urge India to lift curbs on communications in Kashmir. This is quite a relevant one. So again, when the Indian government, when the BJP government imposed those draconian laws. Basically, they poured 500,000 troops into Kashmir. They completely reneged on the constitutional conditional rights that Kashmir had. Kashmir had its own constitutionally stamped in autonomy, from 1947, that was basically ripped up, was torn up by Narendra Modi and rubber stamped by the Supreme Court. Well, she actually introduced a bill in the US to urge India to lift those curbs on all sorts of those draconian measures, which included things like communications blackouts, that are a typical example of closing down the internet, etc., etc. So anyway, she was. I'm just going to play this video now. This was her in Congress. It's a very short video. It's only a little snippet, but it gives a clue of her advocacy. Let me just quickly play you this.
Rubio expressing concerns about Pakistan.
Sorry, I'll play it from
the last thing I want to talk about is the increasing instances of transnational repression. Just last week, I sent a letter to Secretary Rubio expressing concerns about Pakistan's use of transnational repression to stifle dissent. I do need to call it out in the case of India as well. In November of 2023, the U.S. Department of Justice unsealed an indictment alleging that an Indian national working with an Indian government official planned to assassinate Sikh American activist Gurpatwant Singh Panun in New York, was reportedly part of a broader plan involving multiple killings across the United States and Canada. And in addition, Indian intelligence has been linked to digital harassment and disinfo labs. This was an article that actually named me as one of the targets of that disinformation efforts. And so can you just briefly, I have 3 seconds, discuss how this repression hurts our bilateral relationship?
I think this is an area where I'm less informed and less of an expert in
etc. So apologies to the audience there. Button issues. Forgot to show you the thing. Anyway, basically, it was her speaking to this gentleman. Now, the gentleman actually can't answer the question. The key point here, though, and the reason I've shared this video, this is really important because she herself actually has been the subject of transnational repression, of misinformation coming out of Delhi. And but the point is, this is yet again in a very high-profile hearing in the US administration, in public. Again, this hit mainstream media. She has raised the issue of Indian transnational repression. She didn't hold back. There's absolutely no ambiguity here. She says, I am basically obliged to highlight the fact that India is interfering in the United States. It is interfering with our own citizens. Of course, she referred to Panun's assassination plot, but of course she referred to the infiltration and the imposition of Hindutva policies into US policy formation, etc., etc. So again, it's really important this because it is becoming increasingly mainstream, this message that India is getting heavily involved. Indian Hindutva forces are now being seen as interfering in US politics, as being interfering with US citizens. So again, I think the fight to actually highlight India's, and I keep calling it misbehavior, that's a real euphemism that, but India's misbehavior is being highlighted on an increasingly regular basis. Now, when of course we come to talk about Khalistan, this is really crucial, particularly in the United States. The United States has a hugely powerful voice, obviously, on the global stage, and particularly at the United Nations. Quite often when the US says something, it becomes policy. In other words, they are the big brother on the block, or they are the big alpha male there. In other words, what the US wants, the US tends to get. So if the US administration at any given time feels in any particular way, that obviously has a massive influence on UN policy. You only need to look at the Iraq War as a prime example of that was driven by US foreign policy, despite many other countries standing up against it. So ultimately, if the US administration is actually on side with the whole concept of Khalistan, if the US administration is fully cognizant, is fully aware of India and India's behaviour and its negative impact on US society, as indeed is being highlighted regularly now, it is going to align much more amicably with the whole idea of Khalistan. So all this, again, is just lots and lots and lots of pieces of evidence right across various things, whether it's presentations to the UN itself or whether it is in Congress, like, for example, here, or in all these commissions looking into these subjects. The concept of India's transnational repression, particularly against the Sikh population, is raised over and over and over again. It becomes an established fact, effectively. It's painting that overall picture that becomes, over time, an established fact. And again, this really helps that whole legal case for the establishment of Khalistan. So this is why things like this, although relatively small in size and appearance, they actually all build up this huge pyramid of evidence, this huge weight of evidence that is going to help that legal case push the case of Khalistan over the line. So there, James, I think just as I say, it was just worth showing this one because, again, it does highlight yet again at the highest levels in the US government, India's behaviour is being discussed openly.
Yeah. And that's very important. It is about the communication because the more that it's spoken about in public, in Congress, in Parliament, depending on where we are, of course, the more attention that it draws. The more attention it draws, then, of course, the more pressure that the politicians are going to feel to actually start taking steps to demand better out of India when it comes to cooperation for law enforcement, when it comes to, stopping their government and their ministers' actions or political figures, stopping their actions from the foreign interference. So again, there's just so many reasons why this public outcry or these public statements are so essential to the furtherment of stopping what they're doing.
Yeah, and just as a sort of a tail end to this one, there was a couple of comments on social media about this lady, which actually, and again, I've never heard of this woman before, to be perfectly honest. But just to give you a clue, right. and we'll have to be a little bit careful about what she says, because this guy Raj Karan Singh Hundal says, look, she's never stood up for Sikhs in her life. Stop gaslighting. Tell her about Modi's war against Punjabis and Muslims alike. Thank you. Good night. So in other words, well, clearly she has been very vocal about protecting immigrant population in the US. But this gentleman believes that she's never stood up for Sikhs in the past. So again, who knows? Patrick Smith, whoever Patrick Smith, says, look, if you need to understand, you don't want to be associated in any way with Jayapal. If you want anyone to believe you. So again, I suspect this guy might be from the right wing. So again, she's clearly a target of all sorts of ire and anger and unhappiness from all quarters. I mean, certainly from a Sikh gentleman, and then presumably from somebody from the right wing, which is understandable. But anyway, I think our audience can probably make up their own mind. But it doesn't detract from the key point here is that however good or bad she is, she has raised this very point, which is really, really important. So. Right. Again, also now going to move on to, this is an important story. The BBC has reported overnight in India that India has actually now formally charged a couple of militant groups for the Pahalgam attack. Now, I say this is important because I wanted to sort of just revisit some of the evidence that has actually re-emerged or emerged since these original attacks. And we all talk about these accusations flying around social media and actually even in the mainstream media internationally, in some quarters, particularly obviously Pakistan, that it was potentially a false flag attack. Now, anyway, but reported overnight is that two Pakistan-based organisations, Lashkar-e-Taiba, that's LET, and the Resistance Front, the TRF, have been charged with planning, facilitating, and executing the attack. And this is no surprise because these are two names that that were thrown out right at the very beginning by India. Right. Now, Pakistan hasn't responded on this. They've not made any formal comment on these charges, but the TRF. Interestingly, this is a key line. I'll come back to this line. The TRF had initially said it was behind the attack, but later denied its involvement. And I'll come back to that. So these charges name the militant groups and 6 others. Interestingly, of course, at the time, and this a couple of months ago, 2-3 months ago, 3 of these so-called alleged attackers were killed by security forces, days after the attack. So, of course, dead men can tell no tales, rather conveniently. Now, a man accused by the National Investigation Agency of India of being a Pakistani terrorist handler, Sajid Jat, and 2 others have been in custody since June. They've also been put on the charge sheet. Now, this is interesting. During interrogation, the 2 men had disclosed the identities of the 3 armed terrorists involved in the attack. They are the 3 guys killed, rather conveniently, and had also confirmed that they were Pakistani nationals affiliated to LET. Now, notice here, during interrogation, they happened to conveniently name these 3 men who were conveniently killed and can thus tell no further tales. We do know what interrogation entails in India. Of course, we refer to it regularly. There's evidence all over the public domain about what an interrogation involves in India. It involves certain elements of torture, which, of course, in any other normal democratic nation is not just illegal and outlawed. It means any evidence gathered under torture is immediately dismissed as unreliable. Science, evidence, whatever, has proved that any evidence given under torture is totally unreliable. You can never rely on information given to you under torture for obvious reasons. And yet, rather conveniently, these two men who have been charged rather conveniently under interrogation, and I put that in quotation marks, happened to conveniently name the three men that also conveniently were killed shortly after the attack. So again, you can start to see suspicions being raised. The NIA said its 8-month probe traced the conspiracy to Pakistan. Well, surprise, surprise, how jolly convenient. Now, interestingly, I wanted to come back to that line. Of course, it was reported in the news that those militants were shot dead a few days after the attacks. Rather conveniently, there is the BBC report from that time. Now, also, as I say, I wanted just to visit some of the evidence that has emerged since the time of what actually is sort of going on beneath the surface here. The TRF, that was one of these groups in Pakistan that's been charged with this attack, they actually have said, no, it wasn't us. We were not behind this. So the original attack, of course, was attributed by India. Of course, the whole Godi media, there was this Godi media pile-on saying it was these wretched TRF terrorists behind this, because of course they were fed this line by presumably Indian intelligence to go out and promulgate, to send out this message to the Indian people that it was TRF behind this attack. Interestingly though, the reason they said this was that TRF originally claimed responsibility for the attack, but the TRF said, actually, this message that claimed responsibility for the attack, it was an unauthorized message. It was posted on one of its digital platforms, as they, in their official statement since then, they said it was posted as a result of a coordinated cyber intrusion. They said it wasn't us. We didn't put this message up. They said they blamed Indian cyber operatives, adding the claim was false, it was hasty and part of an orchestrated campaign to malign the Kashmiri resistance. And they said, after an internal audit, we've reason to believe it was a result of a coordinated cyber intrusion. We ourselves, as TRF saying this, we're conducting a full investigation to trace the breach, and early indicators suggest fingerprints of Indian cyber intelligence operatives. Now, the latest statement featured the group's name and logo and follows the design pattern used by the group historically. Again, here's another piece of evidence. So, this statement that the TRF have put out saying, it wasn't us, we've done our own investigations, and we didn't post this message up saying we were behind the attack. Somebody else did. We've done our own investigations, and it's clearly a cyber attack. We were hacked, and it looks like it's got the fingerprints of Indian intelligence all over it. Now, this latest statement from TRF has its official logo, its official format. In other words, every message that TRF sends out follows a very precise format. It's got its official logo, etc. But the first statement, where it claimed involvement in the attack, was totally different from the group's usual statements and did not feature the group's name or logo. So again, we often talk about how clumsy Indian intelligence is. I mean, I hate to say it, I'm a big fan of India, but ultimately their intelligence agencies are a little clumsy and amateurish. They've only been at it for a few decades, and clearly they've tried to hack TRF's website or whatever, one of these platforms, and put this hastily put together claim of responsibility, and they've used the wrong logo. They haven't even used the right logo. So again, you can see why, again, the TRF is saying this is a joke. You know, you're trying to say that we claim responsibility. Well, we didn't, and whoever it was didn't even use the right logo and didn't use the normal format.
Yeah.
And the latest statement was first posted in a Telegram channel, the Resistance Front J&K, that claims to be the only official group of TRF. And it's notable the channel was created on the 25th of April and had no previous messages. 25th of April, of course, the date of the Pahalgam, or around that date. And as they said, we resist through principal resistance, not through staged barbarism. We fight occupation, not civilians, one post said, adding the TRF had no hand in bloodshed. It warned the group would reveal more information about India's operations in coming days, and we're still waiting for that, actually. The Post also mentioned India's covert operations in other areas like Balochistan in Pakistan, Myanmar and Bangladesh. Yeah, we do know that the NIA have got their fingers all over all sorts of operations in neighbouring countries. It went on to say India had conducted similar false operations in the past. You only need to look back at the Chitti Singh Pura massacre as one example of that, with the aim of demonising Kashmiri jihadis and distracting internal dissent. And the TRF denial also came a day after Lashkar-e-Taiba, this other organisation in Pakistan, this other proscribed terrorist group in Pakistan that was also charged, who likewise denied the group's role in the attack. In a video widely circulated on social media, it criticised Indian media for wrongfully blaming him and Pakistan for the attacks. So these two groups that have been charged have said, look, it wasn't us. It doesn't follow our usual modus operandi, our normal way of doing things. They say, yeah, we are resisting. There's no secret about that. We are militant groups resisting the occupation by India of Kashmir. But the Pahalgam attack wasn't us because it doesn't follow how we do things. It has absolutely no familiarity or no similarity to any other attack that we do. In other words, why would we do this? Et cetera, et cetera. So again, James, as I say, the evidence, and clearly across social media, many people agree with this idea, this concept that this whole Pahalgam attack was likely to be a false flag on behalf of Indian intelligence to whip up tensions with India, to distract, obviously, from issues back in India. There was Bihari elections imminent, so again, there was the accusations that the whole thing was designed to try and boost support, failing support for the BJP at the time for Bihari elections, and of course to whip up tensions with Pakistan, etc., etc. So there you go, James. Again, I think the story obviously has many, many layers. It certainly is not as straightforward as it first appears, where India is claiming, right, we've got them, we're going to bang them to rights. It was these two Pakistan-based terrorist organisations. Clearly there's a lot more to this story, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's reminiscent of the stories in the past year we've talked about AI and the cyber warfare and, all of the deep fakes. And here's one that, as you stated, I mean, it's almost laughable. It's so sloppy and so, irresponsible when it comes to trying to frame someone. You would think that you would use some common sense, especially using the right logo of the organization. When you fail to do that, you blow the credibility of your own claims against this group out of the water. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing where the impact of cyber attacks and cyber warfare, cyber impersonations, deepfakes, they are getting to be at a dangerous level because of the fact that they are so realistic in many ways, or they are hidden so well in the backgrounds that it's amazing that India still hasn't perfected this, because we know they spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on bots and misinformation campaigns, AI, all of these things, and yet they can't even get something as simple as a logo correct, Angus.
Yeah, and it's frustrating in many ways because there is Islamic extremism and Islamic terrorism in the world. Yeah. It is a sad fact of life. And we all condemn it deeply. We condemn it just as much as the Indian government do. Of course, it is an issue that we need to address. But ultimately, if you're directing your resources into chasing false issues like this, if indeed it is a false flag operation, then you are actually you're weakening your own ability to fight genuine Islamic terrorism. And again, it's all for political reasons. Unfortunately, once the politicians get involved in these things, it tends to make a mess of things, as they do. And so it's likewise here in the West. We have the same issues. We have a problem with Islamic terrorism, and it's once the politicians get involved in it, it all starts falling apart. So again, I as I always do, and I certainly tend to do on a regular basis, I point the finger of problem of the real issue, pointing to the wretched politicians who just cannot get things right regularly. Yeah. So anyway, let's move on, James, as the clock counts down. Let's move on to our comments column. Thank you to our audience for huge contributions as they regularly do. Thank you to our loyal audience, and of course many newcomers who've arrived, putting all sorts of interesting comments in. Thank you for all your contributions. Bobby Singh starts us off. with talking about Khalistan and basically how do we get to the whole establishment of Khalistan peacefully and democratically and non-violently, as you say. Well, let's break down India financially, as you claim it was. India was formed by the British financially. It was a huge economic powerhouse, of course, through the East India Company, and it's how they broke the USSR financially. When India has the financial strength, it's harder to challenge. So we need to unite to break India financially. I think it's quite a tough ask, that, but certainly I think we can do it democratically, James.
Yeah, and I think that a part of that is the combined defense that we'll get or that we'll see in other nations, just because, as we know, that there is so much need by Western nations to trade with India and to make sure that they are financially stable enough to act as their proxy or to host different nations when it comes to security in the Asian Pacific region. So yeah, it's that would be a lot tougher than it would sound, I would think.
Yeah. Harjit Baines, you came up with an interesting comment. That you used an AI tool to do a comparative study of major religions of the world. We often talk, James, about how your research into AI came up with Sikh as basically the best option for humanity. But Harjit says Eastern religions, as you found, Harjit, have a leaning towards, I must confess, I didn't understand this, positive zero-sum dynamics. I can only assume that's, I would say, more about equality of all of us. But when factored in, one prominent Manu Simriti, that's a Hindu constitutional legal text, being practiced in modern free India, the biggest democratic India promoting Hindutva, it highlighted a gross discrepancy in the principles of governance. I think you're absolutely right. I think Hindutva, well, we certainly know the concept of Hindutva is definitely completely anathema, or certainly opposite to anything to do with equality of humanity, James. We know it is the great unleveler. It divides Indian society into these awful divisions of supposedly the superior against the inferior.
Absolutely, and that's where you see the caste system is still, although it's technically outlawed, I mean, the caste system is very active. And again, that's very prominent within the Hindutva realm, so to speak, Angus.
Yeah, indeed. And I think one of the worst religions for humanity would indeed be Hinduism, based primarily on the caste system. Sam Singh says the UK. Oh, yeah, we're talking about the British government. Oh, don't get me started on this one. I'll try and keep this short, because no doubt I'm going to have a rant once I start. The UK is a joke since the Labour government. I mean, yes, absolutely. As I have said several times, the Starmer government is not even arguably, I think, is statistically, provably, in every instinctive feeling, it is the worst government this country sadly has suffered in certainly modern history and arguably in history. The whole sequence of failures in every aspect. Even Labour voters who voted for this government are falling away in absolute disbelief and despair, saying, how on earth can a government get it so wrong on every single issue? But Mountain and Forrest says that the Conservative Party, it's the right wing, has visionary politicians. Labour only keep their bank balances high without any responsible sense. Well, I think what I would say there is actually the Conservatives, and I used to be a Conservative voter, I'm not anymore, because I've realised the Conservative Party are just as bad. They're all as bad as each other, James.
Well, it's like I always say, Angus, if we want smart politicians, if we want passionate politicians, ones who will and can institute change, we got to change the system, because they're also too smart to get into politics.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is a bit of a rabbit hole. We don't have time to go down. But again, our democratic system, I feel, is deeply flawed because, for example, here in the UK, population of what? About 70 million people. Starmer has ended up being the leader. Allegedly, according to our system, Keir Starmer is the best leader of 70 million people that we can find. Obviously is not. So in other words, the system is systemically flawed, that it allows people like Reeves, our Chancellor, and Starmer to become our leaders and dictate our government policy. I mean, it's frightening. But anyway, Kay Singh sends out a word of warning. Neoliberalism is in its final death throes. It's not reversible. It's important to realise what's coming has a completely different logic. Now, of course, we've had this neoliberalist experiment for many years right across the Western world. which arguably, and I'm deeply against it. I find it really has brought some real serious problems across our society. But it's dying, and sadly, the backlash to that is, of course, the pendulum always swings equally and opposite. It's like the laws of physics, is that there is always an equal and opposite reaction. And of course, the further left you go, or the further towards this neoliberalism, as Casing points to, it's going to swing equally and oppositely in the opposite direction, towards the right wing. And of course, there's fear now that the rising right wing extremism is a potential problem. Now, clearly, much of the population in the Western world has swung to the right, generally speaking. It's not right extreme, but certainly to the right of centre, which is no bad thing in itself. But of course, it is also encouraging the right wing extremes. And so, of course, there is this fear. And of course, Nazis are, I could have the word Nazis appearing again. And again, that's a term that's easily thrown across by neoliberals to anybody who stands up to them. They're immediately a fascist or a Nazi, which immediately means they've lost the argument. But in reality, there are genuine Nazis who are appearing. Now, I didn't see this full interview with this guy, Nick Fuentes. I just saw a few excerpts. And I think this, apparently, I don't know, and I'm sure our audience might correct this, but Nick Fuentes is actually a supporter of the Nazi ideology, etc. So again, this is why we need to be very, very careful. And the warning here is Sikh MPs are the useful idiots of this whole sort of idea. They are blind to the big picture. What is the big picture? Well, we've tried to point to it on a regular basis. But James, ultimately, we are seeing huge shifts. And I've said before, I think the first half of next year we'll see some massive change globally speaking.
Absolutely. And I think that we're already seeing it in some nations in terms of that pendulum swing. And, we've seen it go from one extreme to the other, and there's just no real ground right down the center. And that's where the majority of the population lies. But as I say, they're not on the extreme level of the left or the right. They are just down the center, and they want to stay focused on themselves, trying to get through all of the crap that's going on in our society. And that's where they are focused. They're not dealing with all of the other things. So again, we need to find somewhere to focus down that center line again.
Yeah, we're in some very dangerous political dynamics at the moment because, of course, the real weight of everything sits somewhere in the middle. You're either left of centre or right of centre, but generally speaking, normal, decent people, 85% or whatever of the population sit in that central ground, either central left, central right. But when that momentum, that huge weight swings either extreme left or extreme right, that's when we start to get problems. Of course, that's what happened in 1930s Germany, is that mass weight of people, of ordinary decent people, was swung, I won't even say to the right, actually, ironically, it was a socialist. But anyway, it swung towards the Nazi party, whichever side they sit, but they were the genuine fascists. And it's when the general population moves towards that extremism, that's when the danger signals start arising. So, and again, we need to be very careful where we are swinging across the Western world at the moment. Punjab, on the orders of Keir Starmer's march in India. Yeah, the government. This talks about Gurpreet Singh. This terrible story I reported the other day about this Sikh who's basically condemned by the British state as a terrorist. With absolutely no evidence whatsoever. He never appeared in a court of law. And again, this is another warning sign of dangerous authoritarianism creeping into the United Kingdom. And it was an absolute outrage. And again, he was, as I said at the time, the canary in the coal mine. He is a warning signal that something dangerous is happening in our society, where the state can decide arbitrarily that you are a danger to the state. Doesn't need to provide any evidence. It can just put into motion the wheels of the state and close you down. It can close you down financially, socially, everything. And again, that's another reason why you must resist digital ID. Do not accept digital ID in this country, because again, the government can close you down at the press of a button because it just doesn't like you. And this is a prime example of this. So Punjab, thank you for highlighting that absolute point. Now, we had this gentleman, or it might be a lady, but the juicer came in, sort of wading into the comment section on a regular basis. Thank you, the juicer, with a counter narrative. Khalistan is a scam created by Indian government for this very reason. Angus also says they want a strong base in Khalistan with the British. It's nonsense. You can't trust anyone. Well, the bit I would agree with you on that one is you can't trust anyone. And again, the Sikh population know full well, the Sikh community know they cannot trust anybody, James, as was pointed out through various betrayals, whether it was the British in 1947, whether it was Nehru, the Gandhi dynasty, etc., etc. You just cannot cannot trust anybody. And likewise now, here, sadly, in the UK as a prime example, you cannot trust the British Labour government that the Sikh community, generally speaking, voted for, and likewise has betrayed. And I sense there's also a sense of betrayal in Canada, James. Again, I'll let you speak in a moment, so I'll just finish these final comments. Minda Singh says, look, go take your juice to India, the juicer. That was a quick dismissal. But the juicer came back with saying, look, you got played by the British. Throughout history, and you're getting played by masterful con men now. Grow a brain, please. And I think I actually agree with you. I wouldn't agree with grow a brain, but I would say the Sikh community need to be very careful. I don't need to preach to the converted. The Sikh community are very careful. They know full well these betrayals, James, go back through history.
They do, and they continue, and it's a sad state of reality that, you have, as you stated a bit earlier there and other comments about the term Nazi and Nazism. And I think that a lot of the people in the younger generation throw those terms around because they don't fully understand or really have a concept of what that truly means. And therefore, they lose the argument with anyone who understands what it means and the intellectual levels. And also, they make themselves look ignorant because they are throwing around a term that they don't understand. When you look at whether it's politicians or anywhere else, again, that pendulum swings. You can't trust. And again, as you said, the Sikhs have learned this through partition. They've learned it over and over again with the governments, the different governments in India and the world, whether or not they are getting support or they are being criticized. Again, it is just so much that that has embedded that distrust and the real fabric of that distrust that is legitimate, and that's a sad thing. And then when you couple into that today's media, where they will take claims against individuals that are being labeled by government without access to information or without actual evidence, then what happens is that these media outlets are treating it as the gospel truth, whereas in past, true journalism and true journalists would provide a truthful narrative backed up by facts, not just backed up by baseless claims by certain politicians or government agencies.
Yeah, as I said, it's a strong warning signal to all of us.
That's right.
And the Juicer does, of course, unsurprisingly, make a wonderful appearance on Critics Corner. Thank you, the Juicer, for your comment. Khalistan and Bindravali as a joke. He was a Hindu, pretty much, fake actor, like you, Angus. Oh dear, it was all created by Congress. So of course it happened like this. It's called entrapment. So I think the point here, and actually I have seen this sort of claim every now and again that Bindravali actually was basically he was a creation of the Congress Party at the time. And having researched his life and the story of Sikhs through the 20th century, I don't think that is the case. He may have had some let's say dialogue with the Congress Party. I don't think he was a Congress Party asset. I think his track record spoke for itself, and the fact that he gave his life so heroically in 1984, fighting and standing up for basic human rights for the Sikh community, I think is very unlikely he was a Congress Party asset. And he wasn't a Hindu. I think there's no evidence whatsoever out there in the public domain, certainly that I can find, that he was a Hindu. So, was he a fake actor like me? Well, James, I hope I don't come across as a fake actor.
They obviously haven't watched any of the TV series or motion pictures that I've been in. There you go. You want to call somebody a fake actor? Come on now.
well, actually, I think one part I must agree with you, the Juice. I have appeared in various television programs as a background, as a supporting artist, and I'm a terrible actor, and I agree with that one. I'm a terrible actor. So that is one part I can agree with you on that. Final set, Jack Johnson.
That makes two of us.
Exactly. That's why we're not paid the superstar wages. But there you go. Jack Johnson. Very well explained. Salute to Panoon of America. The referendum is the only solution for the freedom of Punjab. Again, we always come back to the same conclusion. And of course, we must always, and well done to Jagtan Sidhu for paying tribute for those people who actually we really need to pay tribute to, and that is, of course, the Shaheeds, the martyrs. It is those guys who've actually stood up and literally given everything, including the ultimate price, for the cause, the noble cause of Sikhism, and as of course, the noble cause of Khalistan. Their names are shining like a star in the world. Khalistan Zindabad, James.
Absolutely. And we know that that's the case. And yeah, it's a matter of trying to keep that balance, to honor those who are fighting for the cause, to get information, truth, and peace out there versus all of those who want to see it go the other way. But one day we will see Khalistan.
And there was a belated greeting from Gursevac towards you, James. Hello, Mr. Cousin from Canada.
I saw that, yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you, Gursevac, for that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your thoughts, and all is good. It was a bit of a cleanup, but all is good.
And Hardy, this is a slightly unusual one, but a nice one, a nice, slightly different one to almost finish on, which is God bless America. Of course, America home to about three-quarters of a million Sikhs, primarily in California, but of course spread across the whole of the US. So indeed, and again, I think it's very indicative of typical Sikh diaspora, who always not just integrate fully, they contribute so much to the host nations and become some of the best patriots within that nation. And you only need to look at the Sikhs serving in the armed forces to see any basic evidence of that. But of course, the final sign-off goes to Ragveer Singh. Thank you, Ragveer, for your final contribution of the day, which is Khalistan Zindabad with a great big heart of love, James.
Absolutely. And that's how we love to end the show as well, Angus. So it's just right there. Perfect. Thanks for the comments, everyone.
Indeed. No, great big fat love heart back to our audience. Thank you for your support and your loyalty. It is always very much appreciated. But thank you to all of you for all your comments. Do keep them coming. Do let us know your thoughts and opinions and perspectives on things that we talk about. Do, of course, let us know things that you'd like us to talk about or that you think we might have missed, key stories or rumours even that you hear out there. We always do like to do a bit of digging and find out what is going on out there. So let us know. Don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satlogetv.com if there's anything you want to talk to James and myself directly about. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.